The Galtor Campaign, Phase 2. Excerpt from A Mech Warrior's Life by Margrave Sheridan Douglas, New Avalon Press, 3026. The failure of General Yoriyoshi to crush the Davion forces cost him his job. He remained in charge of the Benjamin regulars on the planet, but General Samsonov became overall commander on Galtor 3. For a moment, Takashi thought of directing the campaign himself, but his counselors pointed out that there was no guarantee that the Combine would win this battle. 3 months after the initial landings, Kuritan had pushed the Davion forces into a perimeter extending from Changli in the south to the Star League storehouse in the north. Middleway Pass fell to Samsonov's 5th Galadon regulars after 3 hours of slow, methodical fighting, typical of Kuritan tactics, and I had nothing left to support the defenders with. General Dobson still held in New Delhi. We reinforced his position with the remaining mechs of Sumner's battalion, but the siege became just a sideshow. He was too weak to break out, and the Draconis Combine was too wary of city fighting to want to break in. Constant skirmishing, however, would keep the MASH stations busy. 5 Kuritan regiments now faced the 2 1/2 regiments left to us. However, these odds didn't reassure General Samsonov. He requested fresh regiments to replace his losses, and reminded Takashi Kuritan of his pledge to support the attack with Imperial troops. In the interim, we gained precious time to make our own plans. Andrew Cunningham, the cautious Draconis March commander, finally attacked and reconquered Marduk. After 3 months of isolation, the way opened for Davion reinforcements. The leaders on Luthien saw the development as the end of any hope of an easy victory on Galtor, and the beginning of a long, bloody campaign. 3 weeks after the battles around New Wuhan City, 2 new regiments landed in our corner of Galtor 3. The Roman DMM would take over the line held by the skeleton 33rd Avalon Hussars, and the Bremen DMM replaced positions occupied by my own 12th Vegan Rangers, which once again became part of the Orbital Reserve. Even the remaining native contingents obtained needed supplies and new equipment. I was apprehensive about the Roman Draconis March militia. Major General Baden Powell commanded a slack outfit with few heavy mechs but many commanders who politically appointed by hacks back in New Avalon. Events would show good reason for my concern, but at the time, any fresh regiment looked better than the dented and stained remnants of the Avalon Hussars. My demeanour though would improve when I saw the Bremen DMM. The regiment arrived at the Star League storehouse in top condition with every mech newly painted and fully operational. For striking power, each Bremen battalion contained a heavy or assault mech company and 1 extra air lance. Most of all, Lieutenant General Mary Tolman exuded an infectious self-confidence. Normally I am plagued by insomnia and chest pains, but that night I slept like a baby. Kuritan, however, soon disturbed this slumber. Kuritan fighters were waiting for the 6 Leopard-class dropships that tried to break through the blockade at New Delhi with reinforcements and supplies. 1 dropship would erupt into flames in mid-flight, and another plummeted through a building and exploded. The 4 others would turn back. Inside New Delhi, Davion quartermasters could issue only 3 or 4 rounds per autocannon or missile rack. Techs stripped all immobilized mechs of laser weaponry and fitted them onto skimmers or civilian hovercraft. During the night, bands of lone wolf mercenaries haunted the old battlefields, salvaging the wrecked mechs for parts, coolant and ammunition. Bitter firefights breaking out between scavengers and Kuritan patrols. Even as our forces grew, so too did the forces of the Draconis Combine. The 11th Benjamin Regiment rotated out, and the green troops of the 6th Benjamin Regulars rotated in. The 3rd Benjamin left to defend the planet Tripoli, as many suspect that this was a move taken to weaken General Yoriyoshi's command. To replace the 3rd Benjamin, Takashi Kuritan authorized the use of 2 regiments from the Amphigean Light Assault Group, veterans with a long history of fighting the Federated Suns. Their orders placed them directly under General Samsonov's direction. As a crowning touch, Takashi Kuritan allowed General Samsonov to command a battalion from the 7th Sword of Light. With such a powerful force, the Draconis Combine felt confident it could sweep aside our opposition and take the real Star League storehouse. In fact, General Samsonov ordered a custom-made, gem-encrusted Wreath of Honor to commemorate his impending victory. So as we move into Phase 2, we have an updated order of battle. In this case, we have House Davion units of Alpha Regiment of the 12th Vegan Rangers, with their CO Bargrave Sheridan Douglas, a regimental battle group with their Union dropship Velasquez in orbit, Bragg's Battalion, which had suffered 20% losses, with their Overlord dropship Santiago also in orbit, Johnson's Battalion, which had suffered 55% losses, with their dropship Time 2 in orbit, and McCulloch's Battalion, who'd suffered 10% losses, with their Overlord dropship Key Biscayne also in orbit. The Bremond Draconis March Militia, with their CO Lieutenant General Mary Tallman, had the Regimental Battle Group 300 km north-northwest of Starleague Storehouse, Jenkins Battalion in the same location, and Spassler's Battalion also in the same location. Marty's Battalion rounded out the Bremond Draconis March Militia, who was also 300 km due north of the Starleague Storehouse. The Roman Draconis March Militia, with their CO Major General Conroy Baden Powell, had his regimental battle group on the coastal road, 1600 km west of the Starleague Storehouse, McNeil's Battalion at the coast of Inner Sea, 160 km west of the Roman RBG, Finnegan's Battalion, also on the coast road, 160 km of Roman RBG, and Seymour's Battalion, also on the coastal road, 400 km east of the Roman RBG. The Dahar Draconis March Militia, with their CO General Sir William Dobson, the regimental battle group at this point was destroyed. Pope's Battalion had suffered 33% losses, but were at the refueling station on Galtor's moon. Sumner's Battalion sat at 66% losses, held up in New Derry, and French's Battalion at this point was completely destroyed. The Galtor Irregulars consisted of the Marquis of Ormond's Battalion at Changley Pass with 25% losses, the New Derry Civil Defence Force at 80% losses, and General Gao Yao Xiang's and his brigade at 75% losses, and the Lone Wolves suffered 40% losses, all stationed in New Derry. Kuritan, on the other hand, had their units with the 17th Benjamin Regulars with their CO General Siovo Yoriyoshi. His regimental battle group was also at the coast of Inner Sea, 2,000 km west of Middleway Pass. Elazar's Battalion with the RBG was 25% losses, the same as Gonan's Battalion, and Sharon's Battalion was at 35% losses. Their air squadron, with the role of ground support, had their CO as Colonel Sirius Golan, had suffered 45% losses. The 6th Benjamin Regulars, with their CO Brigadier General Saad Shazli, the regimental battle group Jaladdin's Battalion and Seleucus's Battalion were all stationed at Changley Pass, with Kurabayashi's Battalion in orbit as a reserve. The 5th Galadon Regulars, with their CO General Grieg Samsonov, his regimental battle group, was stationed 400 km west of Middleway Pass, with Wittgenstein's Battalion at 25% losses in the same location, Stark's Battalion with 0.5% losses, and Marakov's Battalion at 20% losses also stationed 400 km west of Middleway Pass. The 8th Galadon Regulars, with their CO Brigadier General Victor Nicholas, the regimental battle group was outside New Derry, with de Montcalm's Battalion at 15% losses outside the city, Morgan's Battalion 20% losses outside New Derry, and Gates's Battalion outside New Derry. The newly arrived 1st Amphigean Light Assault Group with their CO General Olivet Satterthwaite, with the regimental battle group Yoshinaka's Battalion, Tarahito's Battalion, and Tarai no Kore's Battalion all in orbit. The 2nd Amphigean Light Assault Group arrived as well with their CO Brigadier General Karl Gramanov. All in orbit was the regimental battle group Ophusius's Battalion, Pollux' Battalion, and Themistocles' Battalion. And finally, the Kismet Battalion of the 7th Sword of Light with their CO Colonel Tiresias Oliver, in an unknown location. Opening moves. The Draconians tried painstakingly to convince us that the main attack would be at Chongli. 5 empty Draconis Combine dropships orbited the area while Slayer fighters bombed and strafed our positions mercilessly. Of course, we weren't so easily fooled. Lieutenant General Tallman conceived an elegant misdirection to turn their plan into our advantage. Using the hulks of destroyed mechs and lots of radio chatter, our technicians created a fake vegan regiment defending Chongli. Kuritan was fooled completely, diverting troops needed for the main attack against the Roman and Bremen DMMs to reinforce their position around Chongli. The final push started just after dawn. Waves of light and medium fighters broke through the atmosphere and raked our forward positions, unrelentingly with missile and cannon fire. Our own fighters scrambled to meet them, From the ground, the air battle seemed like a contest between two gods. One could hear the rumble of engines and the bark of weapons, and occasionally you'd see a flash of light or a burst of green flame. Without wings, we were helpless mortals, unable to influence the outcome, but affected by it nonetheless. From the start, the Draconians used their favourite weapon of confusion, electromagnetic pulse bombs detonating in the atmosphere and designed to knock out unprotected communications and computer links. Both sides flooded the air and microwaves of every conceivable jamming frequency. However, a more reliable cover protected the 17th Benjamin and 5th Galladon. A dense fog had drifted over the Roman Draconis March militia positions, hampering visual sightings and forcing many units to use their short-range infrared and audio battle sights. Outposts all on the front reported the approach of Kuritan battle mechs, and the Roman and Bremen DMM units readied themselves. As the Kuritan mechs appeared, they seemed to merge into one another like a single ridge of grey mountains. In typical Kuritan fashion, one battalion, spread thin across the front, scouted for any Davion positions. When it found one, an assault battalion would rush in from the flank or rear, while the scouting units, fighters and artillery would then pin the enemy in place. If the defender broke, the 3rd Kuritan battalion would exploit the gap and ambush any reinforcements. Then the 2nd Regiment would tear through the gap to attack the rest of the regiment from behind. It was a tried and true plan that had worked many times for Kuritan. Death of a regiment. General Baden-Powell of the Roman DMM spent the entire night trying to sort out his communications. A phenomenon called alpha-metric transference shorted out his secure comlinks with my headquarters in the dropship Velezquez. Unable to contact me via regular channels, he encrypted a message and transmitted it via radio. It was a stupid thing to do. Seeded in the upper atmosphere, Kuritan sensors instantly picked up the transmission, traced it back to the source, and alerted the Imperial fighter bomber companies. As the Kuritan attack began, bombers flew straight for the regimental HQ, and within seconds Baden-Powell lay dead amid the white-hot pieces of his mobile HQ. Most techs and support personnel of the DMM had died with him as well. The decapitation of the Roman DMM shattered our efforts to coordinate the sector defense, and our whole left flank plunged into darkness. Colonel Eloise Finnegan now commanded the Roman DMM, if anyone was left alive to tell him. With his first shot, his Centurion's Luxor autocannon malfunctioned, blowing off the right arm and flinging the mech into a ditch 100 yards from its firing line. Conscious and luckily unhurt, Finnegan spent an hour rewiring the circuits in his frozen mech. By the time he fixed the servo link board, his battalion had vanished. The medium and light mechs of his line companies crumbled beneath the Goliath and Stalker battle mechs of the 17th Benjamin's Heavy Assault Battalion. According to his report, Finnegan had struggled with his crippled mech to rejoin his battalion. He'd followed a trail of smouldering wrecks back to the obliterated regimental battle group. Hunkered down amid the smoking shells of coolant trucks and supply trailers lurked the remnants of Finnegan's command. The main Kuritan attack had scattered Finnegan's battalion, then swung right to trap Seymour's battalion against the sea. Finnegan couldn't help the beleaguered Colonel Seymour, but his sense of duty demanded that he at least try. Finnegan stood up, turned on his PA system, yelled, "I'm here and I plan to stay here. Who stands with me?" At first, the only response was a burst of missile fire from Kuritan positions, but then one by one, his mech warriors stood up with him. A cheer broke out, and the entire battalion rallied. Finnegan would gather the scattered mechs into vigorous patrols, which silenced the harassing combine mechs. Other mechs would then load up whatever ammunition and equipment could be salvaged. About 2 hours later, McNeil's battalion appeared after a brief encounter with some Kuritan slayers. No word would come from Seymour's battalion. Scouting parties reported an intense firefight 150 kilometers east of the RBG. The firing lasted 20 minutes, then it trailed off and stopped. No reliable reports on the destruction of Seymour's battalion exist. Kuritan records are frustratingly sparse, and none of Seymour's mech warriors survived. Finnegan contacted me via subspace radio an hour later. He explained his troops' condition and asked to withdraw. I told him I needed his men to buy us time. He asked for reinforcements, and I said I'd try. How could I tell him the Draconis Combine had sacrificed air superiority everywhere else to dominate his sector alone? Already the smouldering hulk of one Union-class dropship, the Behemoth, circled in a decaying orbit. I ordered him to hold until relieved, to block any Kurita advance, and to hang on. By late morning, the 17th Benjamin regular mechs discovered Finnegan's position. Exhausted and low on supply, the 17th didn't attack immediately. Instead, Yoriyoshi called upon General Samsonov to use one of the Amphigean mercenary regiments to continue the attack. The request was a rare example of Kuritan unity during the campaign. Samsonov realised that the 17th was spent as a fighting force and could collapse if it attempted an attack. He sacrificed this opportunity to humiliate and perhaps destroy his opponent Yoriyoshi in order to bring home the attack. If the Draconians had cooperated like this throughout the campaign, I wouldn't be here to tell the story. One battalion of General Satterthwaite's Amphigeans landed on top of Finnegan's position, another dropped slightly to the west, and a third dropped farther out to block any land reinforcement. The Amphigean drop turned into a turbulent, twisting jumble of individual firefights. Well-placed, indirect fire lances eliminating several Amphigean mechs before they hit the ground, but others would soon follow. A few minutes later, 2 battalions rammed the Davion positions. Even the 17th Benjamin, lurking off to the east, scraped together a company to throw into the fight. Finnegan desperately tried to keep his lancers together during the ferocious attack. He leapt from position to position, rallying disrupted lancers and giving away his own ammo. During one leap, his Centurion received hits from 3 different positions. In a blossom of orange and gold fire, the mech tumbled end over end and disintegrated before his men's eyes. Finnegan's death would break the Davion morale, and individual mechs fled the field. Colonel McNeil tried to stop the rout until his trebuchet overheated, McNeil himself being captured and later released in a prisoner exchange before the end of the campaign. The Amphigeans advance. The elaborate deceit created in Changli Pass now paid off handsomely. The Draconians thought the vegan Rangers were thousands of kilometers to the south, and in fact, we were a few hundred miles away and straight up. The Kurita breakthrough required all units, no matter how depleted, to support this advance. The 5th Galadon Regulars engaged Lieutenant General Tolman's Bremen Regiment. The 17th Benjamin would limp into battle on the far right flank of the leading Amphigeans. Most important though, the 2nd Amphigean landed and took up the left flank of the advance, General Samsonov using his last orbital reserve. Roaring through the centre, the 1st Amphigean group pushed forward the rest of the summer afternoon. With 4 hours of sunlight left, the lead battalion came within 100 miles of the Starleague depot. At that moment, I knew the 12 vegan Rangers had to attack. The 17th Benjamin couldn't keep up with the breakneck pace of the advance. To cover the right flank, the 1st Amphigean had detached most of its light mechs. Meanwhile, the 2nd Amphigean scattered itself over 1,000 kilometers of rolling hills, trying to remain in formation and keep up with the 1st's rapid advance. As a result, the 2 battalions of the 1st Amphigean were isolated, in enemy territory, far from air and artillery support, and dangerously close to ours. They were ripe for isolation and destruction. I landed with 2 battalions that afternoon, Johnston's depleted force staying in orbit as a reserve. Supporting the move was all the artillery and air support I could muster. Many of our dropships were left exposed, but it was a chance I had to take. As our dropships descended on Galtor, a red light blinked on my emergency board. Someone was attacking the Starleague storehouse. I had forgotten about the Sword of Light battalion. It took only minutes for the elite battalion to overwhelm the Skank guard at the storehouse, and then they dug in and waited for the counterattack. For a moment, I seriously considered retreating off-world. The loss of the storehouse removed any official reason to remain in the face of overwhelming odds. However, we would stay. We were on this planet to fight Kurita, not to defend a pile of parts. Davion counterattacks. When mercenary fights mercenary, many commanders observe certain forms of etiquette and custom. For example, the white glove that an attacker delivers a minute or two before battle, or the quaint custom of allowing mercenary commanders to fight each other unmolested. As the Amphigeans approached, I realised that such civilised repartee would only endanger our plan. Therefore, we just opened up with every weapon at our disposal. Surprised and reeling from the sudden heat of dozens of lasers, the Amphigeans fell back a quarter of a mile to a small stream. I ordered my men forward, only to face the heat of the mercenaries' guns. The Amphigeans had quickly recovered. They are a magnificent force, I have to admit. Throughout the day, the Amphigeans fell back from one position to another. General Satterthwaite kept her men together and didn't allow us an easy kill. By sunset, elements of the second Amphigean group had arrived, and we withdrew. We'd savaged the lead battalions of the Amphigeans, but we didn't crush them. The situation remained critical, but I refused to surrender the initiative. The failure, though, of the Amphigeans to take the storehouse meant that the Sword of Light was isolated. During the night, I collected some companies, pulled Jenkins' battalion from Lieutenant General Tallman, and the seasoned force of my last reserve battalion, Johnston's. This ragtag regiment would launch a night assault against the elite Kuritan defenders. Technically, we had a 3-to-1 superiority of men and mechs. I wasn't confident that we would prevail, though. I appointed Lieutenant General Tallman commander of the task force precisely because she seemed capable of doing anything. A few minutes after dusk, the attack began with an artillery barrage. Tallman wanted to remind the Kuritan dogs that they were cut off and we could toy with them as we liked. Then, she charged the perimeter of the storehouse from 2 separate points. Savage battles erupted across the front as the Sword of Light threw everything they had into its defence. Overhead, our fighters dropped flares and hovering searchlights to pinpoint Kurita positions. The Kurita battalion responded by blasting 6 Sparrowhawks out of the sky. By sheer dint of determination, Tallman would slowly push the perimeter back, stalking each other amid the smoke, the haze and the darkness. Mech warriors fought with a kind of eerie, cold fury. The advance proceeded through the gloom silently, punctuated by a series of sudden, terrifying surges of light, noise and explosion. By dawn, the surviving defenders had retreated to the storehouse and threatened to blow up the base. General Tallman took their vow seriously, but she agreed to a plan devised by Colonel Jenkins. A back entrance, seemingly unknown to the Sword of Light, allowed Jenkins and his lance to enter the storehouse undetected. In unison, with a diversionary attack outside, the Davion mech surprised the defenders, taking control of the detonation device. Outside, Tallman's troops rushed the storehouse. It took them only 3 minutes to blow the doors and reach the fight, but Colonel Jenkins and 3 other mech warriors were already dead. The destruction of the Sword of Light battalion seemed to sap the fighting spirit from General Samsonov. Instead of attacking, he retreated and would regroup. Less than 12 hours later, the first elements of the Robinson and Clovis DMMs arrived in orbit. The Draconis Combine had lost its chance for victory. Soon after the arrival of these reinforcements, I was relieved of command, and my regiment rotated to Verde for some much-needed rest and refit.